Good morning. It's Tuesday, March 22nd, 2016 for a daily weather briefing. Got a lot of weather to cover today, possibility of a couple of severe weather events this week, and just a more transient active weather pattern throughout the United States as we enter in more in depth into spring and eventually we'll transition over to summer later on. But let's get started with today's current weather situation. And let's start out at the west here. Constant flow of storm systems moving on to the west again as the doors now opened up again. High pressure off the west coast, but this will be being shifted south a little bit as a pretty strong storm system comes out of the Gulf of Alaska. We do have scattered showers and snow showers across the Intermountain West associated with the storm system that's passing through. And temperatures right now range from about 48 to 50, mid 50s in that area. And there's some cooler temperatures in the Intermountain West, so nothing too crazy as far as temperature wise, but obviously available for snow out there, which will be good for the snowpacks. South of that storm system, a lot of wind beginning to pick up across the southwest and into the central plains. And when we get into the watch warning map, we'll talk about what the repercussions of that are. Warmer temperatures already in the mid 70s to upper 70s in parts of the panhandle of Texas, all the way into Arizona, and a good southerly flow coming up through the southern plains as this low pressure system, actually several low pressure systems, begin to join into one major low pressure system later today and tomorrow. A polar front up to the north, which is not really ushering any kind of colder air. It's cool air, I would say, but allowing enough snow along the border here, especially along the Great Lakes region and over the southeastern portion of the United States and in the Midwest. Again, southerly flow here around high pressure, starting off with some cooler temperatures this morning with some and so forth, but temperatures are now moderating throughout the day as the flow becomes more southwesterly. And in the Northeast, well, they haven't quite seen spring yet, although they did see it a couple of weeks ago. That has now retreated as we now have temperatures and a fresh coat of snow across the Northeast with temperatures in the roughly the low 20s to the mid to upper 30s in that area. But generally, the weather's not too bad across the United States, pretty normal, except a few areas above normal at this point. Let's look at the watch warning map, and this is just kind of looks like somebody just kind of took a paintbrush and painted every color they could find on this. Let's start in the northwest portion of the United States. There's some flash flood advisories in the western portion with winter weather advisories in Montana and Iowa. Also, winter weather advisories in Oregon and Northern California. And then we have a mix of winter weather, winter storm warnings and watches across Wyoming, parts of Utah, and parts of Colorado. In addition to that, there are also quite a few wind advisories now in effect for portions of Nevada, California, Arizona, and portions of southwestern Colorado. And there's quite a few weather watches, fire watches now in effect, and red flag advisories extending all the way from Arizona into the Central Plains, along with wind advisories that are in effect for portions of Kansas and Oklahoma, Texas, and into the Central Plains. There's a winter storm watch that now extends from portions of northeastern Colorado all the way over towards upper Michigan or lower Michigan, with a winter storm warning now in effect for the northern portions of lower Michigan. With this upcoming storm system that will be forming there, I would expect these to be transitioned over to they could be transitioned over to winter storm watch warnings and possibly blizzard warnings, as the winds will be very strong around this upper level low that comes out of the central plains later on today. And then we've got our flood advisories and flood warnings that still remain in effect from 2 weeks ago when we had the severe flooding that took place across the southeastern portion of the United States. The northeast and the southeast remain pretty calm at this point in time. Not a lot going on there, but that'll change tomorrow as the storm system begins to form in the central plains. Looking at the eastern satellite view, again, not a lot of happening in the northeast now as it's clearing out. There are some scattered cirrus clouds and some clouds with maybe some scattered mountain snow showers, but they're too light really to pick up on radar at this point in time. Most of the southeast and south central and portions of the United States are pretty clear, with mainly northwest flow aloft at this point. Flows now becoming more southwesterly across the Intermountain West and in the Central Plains and North Central Plains, though, with the storm system that's beginning to form out in the west. Let's take a look at the western satellite, and we can see this storm system that's now moved into the Intermountain West and producing a lot of clouds with showers and also maybe a few thunderstorms and also snow showers in the Intermountain West there. We'll take a look at that on radar in just a minute here. Another disturbance now moving on to the west coast here, and a stronger storm system with a more subtropical jet connection there off the Gulf of Alaska there. Generally, though, the southwest and a portion of the United States from Arizona into portions of Southern California remain relatively calm at this point in time. Now, looking at our radar right now over the northwest, again, we have showers, scattered showers, a peppering of showers, and scattered snow showers. And then we have a general larger area around the Spokane area with some pretty heavy rains falling there right now, and some heavy snow in the mountains there. And then some snow extending into Montana, into Wyoming, down to Utah, and into Nevada there, with some scattered showers out ahead of it. In the Central Plains, not much really happening at this point in time. In the Midwest, we do have some scattered showers. A lot of this, though, is virga being picked up above there, and some of it's forming along the warm front that's developing there. And then some scattered snow extending all the way from Minot, North Dakota, across Duluth, Minnesota, into the upper portion of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and the northern portions of Michigan there. This stuff down at the bottom here is just false radar echoes at this point in time, but generally the United States all the way from Arizona to Maine and south to Florida is pretty clear at this point in time. Now let's take a look at the severe weather analysis coming up here, and nothing to reflect upon as far as severe weather yesterday at this point. Most of the thunderstorm activities in the northwest was pretty isolated and below severe limits, and that's pretty much going to be the situation today. As again, there's a chance for thunderstorms that generally over the western portion of the United States, where you get some instability on the mountains and so forth, but nothing severe expected at this point in time. However, we get to day 2, and that's when things get a little more active across the United States. And at this point in time, we have a slight risk of severe thunderstorms extending from Springfield, Missouri, to just to the southeast of Dallas and southwest of Shreveport, Louisiana. And then surrounding that area, we have a large area of marginal risk of severe thunderstorms extending all the way from around Davenport, Iowa, southward towards Corpus Christi, Texas, or just north of there. And then around there, general thunderstorm activity. As we get a storm system that pulls out of the Central Plains, and with moisture return, we should see a greater risk of severe thunderstorms. We'll talk a little bit about this date in our 5-day outlook here, but that's the current standing. And then if we look at day 3, we again have a slight risk that's in effect for portions of south central Tennessee, most of the northern 2/3 of Alabama, extreme eastern portions of Georgia, and extreme western portions of Mississippi. And then a marginal risk surrounding that area and the larger expanse of general thunderstorms extending all the way from Toronto all the way down to portions of southern Texas all the way over to Florida at that point in time. We'll talk about this one a little bit later also as we get into the 5-day forecast. Looking at winds aloft today at 925 millibars at 18Z, we have a strong southerly flow now. Not so much coming directly out of the Gulf, so a lot of this again is dry air aloft. So that's the reason why we have a lot of the fire watches and red flag advisories. But the winds are going to be screaming here, so we're going to see warmer temperatures, drier conditions. Dew points are going to be pretty low until we get more of a flow off the Gulf of Mexico. Looking at 850 millibars, again, the winds are more southwesterly and not necessarily southerly, so the flow of moisture into this area is pretty weak, but the flow is strong. Winds are gusting all the way up to 50 to 60 miles per hour portions of between Tulsa and St. Louis at this point in time. Looking at the 700 millibar, we have a decent jet now forming all the way off the Pacific coast. We can see the low pressure system over the western portion of the United States extending all the way into the northeast, where we have high pressure bulging over the southeastern portion of the United States, and the polar jets being shunted up to the north here. Now looking at the 500 millibar level, we do have a strong jet behind the trough that's coming into the northwest, which means we're going to continually see this storm system increase in intensity. And then we have high pressure pretty much over the central and southeastern portion of the United States, with the polar jet pretty much shunted up into Canada at this point in time. Looking at the 300 millibar chart, we have a strong jet of about 120 knots behind the low pressure system that's sitting over Idaho at this point. This low will continue to dig towards the southwest here, but it's not really going to mean much for them except for a lot of wind. And high pressure will continue to strengthen across the south central and southeastern portion of the United States as this trough begins to dig towards the west here. Subtropical jet is now towards the south here, and evidence of that was shown on the eastern satellite view when we were looking at that earlier today. Now looking at the aviation weather, there are no convective segments at this point in time, but there is a potential for severe thunderstorm activity pretty much centered around Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, most of Utah, and portions of Nevada, where the upper level low is going to be moving in there with colder air aloft. But over the rest of the United States, there's no convective segments active at this point in time. Looking at turbulence associated with the strong jet stream later today, we do have a convective turbulence for moderate turbulence between 32,000 and 40,000 feet over portions of Colorado and New Mexico. And I would expect some additional isolated events of moderate to strong turbulence to severe turbulence associated with the jet stream as it begins to increase as time goes on. No icing at this point. Looking onto the freezing levels are decreasing across the western portion of the United States. As we see that upper level low move into the area, we'll see those drop to between 1,000 and 3,000 feet. Some areas of surface, obviously meaning surface being in the mountains, we will see freezing levels increase dramatically across the central portion and south central portion of the United States as the warm air aloft begins to push into that area between 10 and 17,000 feet. Mostly 10 and 15,000 feet is probably what we'll see. Now let's take a look at the 5-day outlook, and again I'm continuing the model madness alert because again the models are, even though early on in the stage are pretty accurate, they just can't handle anything beyond 3 days, it seems to be, at this point in time. So let's take a look at today at 18Z. At the 500 millibar level, again we have this trough digging into the west here. Quite a bit of energy there, so that we'll see a lot of precipitation in the the northern portion of the Intermountain West. Not much in the southwest here, so unfortunately they're going to be without any kind of rain again at this point. And then high pressure pretty much dominates across the central and southern portion of the United States. Looking at the surface features, we do have a strong surface low that's going to be forming out here by Nebraska, a 996 millibar low. But as you can see here, the surface flow is pretty much out of the desert southwest here. A lot of dry air here entrained in this flow, so there's not going to be a lot of there's not going to be a lot of moisture associated with this storm at first, generally because it's just coming out of the southwest and the air is just so dry. And then high pressure pretty much has got the Gulf of Mexico bottled up at this point in time. Looking at Wednesday, this low becomes very concentrated across the central portion of the United States and quite potent. So the upper level features are quite strong with the dynamics with this storm. Looking at the surface, though, however, the surface low intensifies to a 987 millibar over central Kansas. And if we had more moisture at this point in time across the United States, we'd be talking major tornado outbreak. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but fortunately, we do not have the moisture return that we would expect to have with a tornado outbreak. And so therefore the tornado aspect and the severe weather aspect is going to be muted at this point. However, when it comes to snow, we're going to have near blizzard conditions from Colorado all the way up into Nebraska, and then we're going to have some icing issues and freezing rain issues into Wisconsin and Michigan right along that warm front. And then south of that at this point in 18Z, not a lot of activity were expected at this point to form according to the models. And we're going to look at a couple of things here. Let's look at the dew point temperatures for 18Z. And again, this is a deep view. And again, sometimes the GFS tends to underdo things. So we got to take this as for the value that it is. Dew points at this point are not expected to exceed above the low to mid 50s. Now, let's not let that be a surprise to us that severe weather could not happen, because I have seen and looked at different events where dew points were in the low to mid 50s, and quite some strong severe weather events did take place, in addition to some long track events and significant events that took place in those kinds of conditions. This is a very dynamic system, and we'll look at the jet and the low level jet here in just a minute. Shear values are not going to be a problem. it's going to be the issue of instability. And even if we don't get, per se, a lot of moisture there, and the instability is somewhat muted. We don't need a lot of moisture right now in this time of the season to create these kinds of severe weather events that are kind of unusual for the areas of Missouri to Illinois, and we just need to keep that in check. Obviously, dew points south of the Red River Valley are going to be in the low to mid 60s, possibly hugging 70 degrees near the Texas coast. So, in portions east of there, as the Gulf begins to open up, we need to watch the flow there begin to transition over time. Looking at the Cape values, though, according to the GFS, most Cape values are 500 joules per kilogram or less. I think this is kind of underdone. I think we'll see a ribbon of stronger instability, especially because there's not going to be a lot of clouds associated with this storm system as it pulls out of the Gulf, pulls out into the central portion of the United States. So there'll be clear air. The only thing is just how much warm air in the middle, lower and middle levels of the atmosphere will cap that instability. So we'll have to watch that. We'll have to watch the moisture return over the next 24 hours too. Now, looking at the winds aloft, there's no doubt that there is a pretty decent low-level jet here, anywhere between 30 to 45 knots, slowly beginning to transition out of the Gulf of Mexico and taking on more of a southerly component here at the lower levels. So definitely there's low-level shear there that could be taking place here. It's not quite as strong as I would expect it to be, but especially for that kind of a surface low, I would expect we might see winds increasing in the next run of this model. And then looking at the upper level models, we have an incredible 500 millibar jet here of pushing close to 110 to close to 115 knots. Coming into the Kansas and Oklahoma area. Now, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, again, I think anywhere from Kansas City down to, I would say, Shreveport, Louisiana, in this line here is where we need to look at for the potential for severe weather. This area here is under the gun in the sense it's going to be in the area of the left entrance of the jet, and then down here in this area will be in the right exit region of the jet. So we might have two areas of potential severe weather that might form. The southern portion is going to be a little more difficult to possibly form because of the cap that might form later in the day. But again, we need to watch this carefully. Even though dew points are not pushing into the 60s and 70s, with this kind of shear potential that's there, not only speed shear but directional shear that's in place, thunderstorms that can get rooted in this environment could become severe, and they could become damaging. It only takes one thunderstorm to get into the right conditions to produce severe weather and long track type severe weather. Long track will definitely be a possibility with these potential storms if they can get going. So we have to watch this. Now let's look at Thursday. Now Thursday is going to be kind of an unusual situation. Again, we have that slight risk over Alabama. This low pressure system, this upper level low, is now going to become more progressive. Doesn't have quite the negative tilt to it, more neutral. And it's going to be, a lot of the energy is going to be shifting up into Michigan. There will be training areas of energy that will be coming down from that storm, but it's not as intense as it was over Kansas. The upper level low, the mid surface low, is also going to be decreasing in intensity. Not much, but it will be decreasing, about 993 millibars with a trailing cold front. So yes, there will be showers and thunderstorms associated with this trough, a low pressure and its frontal passage. Will they be severe? I believe there will be severe storms. But at this point in time, I think the greater risk of tornadic activity will probably be from Kentucky all the way north. If it were to happen, I'm not saying it will happen, but you can't rule out tornadoes here in Alabama or Tennessee either. It just depends on how this transition. Really, to be honest with you, we can't really talk about Thursday because usually about Thursday is when the models tend to go different directions. So we're really going to have to wait until tomorrow before we can really examine what's going to take place on Thursday. But just be aware that the potential for severe weather is there, and again, with thunderstorms, anything can happen. Now looking at Friday, that trough begins to transition to the northeast and begins to shear apart. Another trough begins to dig out of Canada along the west coast, and we come more into a zonal flow, and the temperatures begin to moderate again a little bit, become a little bit cooler as more disturbances kind of come out of the Canadian maritime areas. Low pressure begins to form across the central plains again as the other low moves off into Canada with mostly rain along the northeastern portion of the United States. Not a lot of cold air in the northeast, but there will be some cold air up here in Canada that will be brought down. So don't be surprised if temperatures drop quite a bit there. This low pressure system in here in the central plains is going to be producing snow along the polar front boundary there. So expect that, especially more snow in the Intermountain West. Looking at Saturday, this low now moves into the southwest, and again, another windy situation I believe is going to be forming out here in the southern portion of the United States. They're not going to get a break here with this wind, and I fear that the fire dangers are going to be extremely high across to Arizona, New Mexico, western portions of Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, as this storm mostly took over an overland approach, so there's not a lot of precipitation except where they can get some upslope along the surface. We look at the surface features, and again, we have a kind of a polar front that goes all the way from the upper Midwest, or excuse me, upper Great Lakes, all the way across Iowa, down into Colorado, and into the southern tiers of the southwestern portion of the United States. Definitely cooler air here, not super cold air, but definitely cooler air here. And then south of that, that front's going to be air is going to be juicing up quite a bit, especially over the southeastern United States, where some of that onshore flow off the Gulf could produce some scattered showers and drizzle in that area for Saturday. And then looking for Sunday here, we have two 500 millibar charts, but that's a mistake on my end. We definitely have a more stronger low pressure system now that's going to be moving into portions of Oklahoma here. And again, although at this point in time we don't have any risk and effect here, I think people in the southeast need to be alert to the fact that with this kind of energy that's going to be moving into this area, even though it's more positively tilted, we could see some severe weather later on in the weekend along Easter across Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee if this trough and this model pattern stays together. Again, I'm not sure it will, but we just need to keep that in mind as we transition into the weekend. So overall, in summary, we do have an active potential severe weather this week with Wednesday and Thursday. I think Wednesday may be the stronger day. We'll have to keep an eye on it and just kind of monitor both days as time goes on. We definitely have a high fire danger from the southwest and central and southern plains this week, so you need to be alert to that and make sure that you're aware of the dangers that are there, especially with the strong winds that are going to be happening with this storm system that's pulling out this weekend or this week and then later this weekend. And then model madness continues, and we won't really be settled on any kinds of patterns in the future until about day 3, or really from day 1 to day 3. Anything after day 3 gets a little crazy. So anyway, that's the weather for today. We thank you for joining us. We'll keep you advised as the weather continues to develop, especially tomorrow and Thursday, as severe weather could be a potential. Have a great day. Talk to you later.